All right, welcome to Hard Talks Live. I'm your host, Mike Machunk, and our guest tonight is Alan Katz, the co-creator of Tales from the Crypt. Al, thank you for joining us tonight.
It's a pleasure to be here, Michael. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem, no problem. Now, before I begin, I came fully prepared for this interview. I had about how many weeks have I had to get prepared for this? Several, right? Okay.
You have had ample time to prepare for every possibility and eventuality.
You betcha. Okay. And so here we are. I'll show you this. This is what you had given me last year in Los Angeles.
Yep.
Signed, secured, and framed. That's right.
At HorrorCon LA.
HorrorCon LA. I had blast there, and I will be there next year. I believe it's in June. Okay.
I wonder if it will be there next year. For real. For real.
Okay. So viewers, here it is right here. You got Al Katz, got the Crypt Keeper, and he has someone else here, and we'll go over who that is. I believe that's John Kassir. Is that his name?
Oh, in the picture that I signed for you?
Correct.
No, the picture that I signed for you. All right. The younger person that's strangling the Crypt Keeper is me. That was a publicity picture taken by HBO when I was writing Tales from the Crypt. Yes, they want to take a picture of me with the Crypt Keeper because I wrote every word the Crypt Keeper said, and that was how I felt about the Crypt Keeper. I wanted to strangle the motherfucker.
Man, really?
Because writing for him was like pulling organs through your nose.
But you breathed life. You were the one who breathed life into him. You gave him that soul. You gave him that personality to make him spark and for everyone to like.
When the four big Hollywood producers who approached HBO with a passion project from their boyhoods, this comic collection by EC of all the horror comics, Tales from the Crypt, when they approached HBO with this idea in the late 1980s, on the one hand, HBO was not, they were really mostly movies. They were just dipping their toe into the original programming business. And suddenly these four mega producers, I should also point out that at that particular point in time in the late 1980s, TV was over here and features were way over here. And you did not travel between the two as one can easily today. The occasional TV performer like a Tom Hanks or a Robin Williams would go from TV into feature films. But if you were going from features into TV, man, that meant your career was done. So it was unusual that these four mega Hollywood producers would approach TV, because in essence, at that point, HBO was still TV, and say, well, as they did, we want to take this passion project from our collective boyhoods and take a feature film vision of it and stick it inside your little TV box. And HBO jumped up and down and said, yeah, great, boys, whatever you want to do, go to town. And so they went right to work writing scripts. They never put it into any kind of development where somebody was, in essence, minding how you translate the franchise elements, the things they loved about the comic books, all of that. Well, that's what they are, those franchise elements, and take them from one medium and put them into a completely different medium. It doesn't happen by itself. Just because you write the script doesn't take all those things from there and put them into there. It doesn't. You have to do each and every piece by hand, in essence. Well, they never hired anybody to do that. The first three scripts were terrific, and yeah, they were all after the same general idea. The first three episodes were Bob Zemeckis's All Through the House, Walter Hill's The Man Who Was Death, and Dick Donner's Dig This Cat, He's Real Gone, which are wonderful. They're absolutely brilliant. The second three of the first season, which was 6 episodes, is not quite so good. Then HBO thought, hey, but we're happy. And they ordered a second season of 18 and a third season of 13 episodes. And they went off to start writing scripts, the executive producers did. No one ever still put any kind of development process. And then that's why towards the end of the 18 episodes were all over the damn place. Because nobody was minding the franchise store, which is something that you have to do. Excuse me. Similarly, the executive producers, being movie guys, really had no idea how to make a TV show or how to finance a TV show, how to pay for a TV show. When whatever the network is, when they run it the first time, the second time, the third time, they pay what's called a license fee in order to play it. But the license fee, that whatever they pay that first time, the second time, the third time, even put together, that's not going to pay for the cost of production. Production's much bigger than that. It's going to have to get played a lot of times and get into syndication and get played a lot of times. And then it will be profitable. In order to cover the actual cost of production, you're supposed to get what's called a deficit part. Well, the executive producers of Tales from the Crypt, that second season, they never got a deficit part. HBO cash flowed everything. And the night before the wrap party, HBO handed the executive producers a financial statement and said, guys, you are $1 million cash in the hole. If you want that third season, then there was lots and lots of money in the third season for the executive producers. So yeah, they wanted that third season. HBO said, you need to give us that $1 million right now. So the executive producers promptly canceled the wrap party. They fired everybody and they got out their checkbooks and gave HBO the $1 million, knowing they were going to get their $1 million back out of the budget of season 3, which is exactly what they did. Plus they got their fees on top of it all. So it didn't cost them anything. But HBO insisted that they were not going to, that whoever was going to produce this third and final episode of Tales from the Crypt, at the third and final season of Tales from the Crypt, they wanted a responsible producer. One of the first people I met in Los Angeles when I flew out to Hollywood for a week of meet and greet in June of 1985 was this producer named Gil Adler. Now, I wasn't a horror guy. Gil wasn't a horror guy. I wrote comedies. And Gil also, well, he wasn't a horror guy. He came out of theater in New York, comedies. But he trained as an accountant. And he knew that if you have $1 to make your movie or TV show, do not spend $1. You haven't got it. But he also understood that if you could make your movie or TV show for 99 cents, 98 cents, still make it look like that $1, well, this is a very good thing. Hey, better yet, if you can do it for 97 cents or 96 cents and make it look like $1 or $2, now you're on to something. The creative process is really just problem solving. And Gil's answer to how you solve these problems wasn't throw more money at it, it was throw more creativity at it, which was exactly how I approached the creative problem solving. And so we hit it off immediately. We became best friends. We became writing partners. Gil got hired by HBO to produce a show for them called The Hitchhiker up in Vancouver, and that went quite well. They saw
that series. That was a good one.
And Gil produced that series, and they saw that Gil was a very, very responsible, creative producer. A couple years later, they had another problem production, a big ticket, big egos, a thing called Vietnam War Stories. It was shooting in Savannah. It was over budget. The schedule was a mess. And they sent Gil in to take it over and turn it around, which is what he did. Not only did he bring it in, but it won awards. And a little while after that, they had another problem production with lots of money and big egos, and they wanted Gil to take that over, and that was Tales from the Crypt. Since I was Gil's writing partner, he said, well, I want Alan to come in as the story editor to be responsible for looking after the franchise. And since the executive producers had never thought that way before, that they even needed someone, they said, well, we don't care. HBO was happy to have somebody minding the store. Hey, take it out of if it's in the budget, we don't care. And so, though I did not have any of the bona fides or the qualifications to do that job, I became really the showrunner on Tales from the Crypt. I had two jobs. One was as the story editor. My job was I was the overseer of the franchise to make sure that every last bit of the franchise that we wanted taken from the comic books and put into the series made it across that great divide. And therefore, as a result, every single script had to go through me before it went to the department heads, before it went to casting. I rewrote every single script. My other job was to write Crypt Keeper segments. Just as the executive producers hadn't developed the show or gotten a deficit partner, there was no development whatsoever with the Crypt Keeper. The Crypt Keeper in the comic books is an old white guy with stringy hair. The executive producers wanted their own Crypt Keeper, and one day, purely by happenstance, at a storage facility, our executive producer Joel Silver saw that the storage locker across from his was owned by a guy named Kevin Yeager, a special effects guru. Among the other things that Kevin created was, of course, Chucky. When Joel saw what was inside Kevin's storage locker, he said to Kevin, "You got to make me a Crypt Keeper." And so Kevin made the Crypt Keeper puppet, which is actually 6 puppeteers working in concert with each other. Kevin found John Kassir, who became the voice of the Crypt Keeper. So they had a great puppet, they had a great voice, but no one had ever asked the question, so who is he? My job, like I said, one of my jobs was to write all the Crypt Keeper segments. And to be honest, I don't know how you write for a character who doesn't exist, who isn't there. How do you write for a Cypher? And so just to do my damn job, I had to create a character for him. I grew up loving old movies. I loved the Marx Brothers. And so the Crypt Keeper became my little Groucho. And needing to stick a personality inside him and being a writer and therefore somewhat lazy, I reached for the closest personality at hand, which was mine. And so I stuck me inside of him. And so the Crypt Keeper looks like Kevin's puppet. He sounds like John's voice, but every thought in his head, every word that tumbled from his animatronic mouth was me. Whatever else happened that third season, something really happened. We reinvigorated the franchise. We got stars to do the show again, and the Crypt Keeper suddenly emerged as the franchise. That, more than anything, changed the fate of Tales from the Crypt, the emergence of the Crypt Keeper as this personality.
It altered it, versus how it was introduced in the late 50s through EC Comics.
Suddenly, we had, rather than 3 seasons, we did 7 seasons. And
I remember
doing Tales from the Crypt was everyone who did that show would tell you, looking back on their careers, that was one of the highlights of our careers because of all the freedom that we had. I saw 5 seasons. 70 some odd episodes. I got a total of 3 notes from HBO. 3 notes over that whole time. That's tremendous creative freedom to do the job you hired me to do. And that was the freedom that the entire creative team felt about doing Tales from the Crypt. The franchise suddenly became incredibly valuable, and Universal Pictures recognized that, and they approached the partners, and a 3-picture deal was made. And for a little while, we came within the same postal code of doing Quentin Tarantino's From Dusk Till Dawn, but we couldn't close the deal with Quentin. There was another script that was around that, frankly, was a better script, called Demon Knight. And so everyone decided that we would make Demon Knight as the first Tales from the Crypt feature film. Gil was supposed to direct it, but he didn't
That was
want to do.
supposed that was supposed to become a trilogy, correct?
Well, yes, there are three. There are three. It is a trilogy. The third movie, they found something and they stuck Tales from the Crypt on it. We made two, and then Universal wasn't going to do the third, but they were forced by contract to output a third, which at some point they did. The mandate was to make three different movies. Like I said, Gil didn't want to make a monster movie, which is what Demon Knight was. And so we decided, since he was going to direct it, that we would do the second movie. And Demon Knight, of course, turned out quite well. Ernest Dickerson directed it. He did a fantastic job. An amazing cast. Billy Zane is a terrific villain in Demon Knight. Jada's terrific. Bill Sadler is wonderful. The whole cast is sensational.
Not to cut you off, Al, but one of my followers wanted me to ask you about Billy Zane and Jada Pinkett Smith. Obviously, you know them. If you will, share with us how you personally perceive them. How are they like?
Well, Billy's, it's funny. All right. I've known Billy actually for quite a long time. I first met Billy Zane when he was 16 years old. I met him through, I met him through his sister, Lisa Zane, also an actor. I went to college with Lisa Zane. I was a year ahead of her at Vassar. And my senior year, we did a Brechtian version of Cabaret. And Lisa was the female lead and I was the male lead. And on the weekend that we performed the show, the Zanes came in from Chicago and bringing young Billy along with them. He was 16. And he was pretty then. He's pretty now. He was even prettier then. And he also, even at 16, he knew how to work the room. And this is absolutely true story. One of my housemates' girlfriends, Billy was with her. Billy scored on my housemate's girlfriend. He scored on a college guy's girlfriend. That's how pretty Billy was. He was a monster back then, and so Billy, he's very much a total pro. He knows what he is. He knows what he is selling. He knows what his brand is, and he knows how to sell it. That's what everybody is in this business. And the sooner you recognize what you can sell, and how to sell it, all right, then you might be able to scratch your way in this town. Worked with Billy twice. We hired Billy to do an episode of Tales from the Crypt. He did a terrific job. Two-Fisted Hams with Martin Sheen. And then when we hired him for Demon Knight, I think it was a sensational choice. And Billy, that is one of Billy would tell me that was one of his favorite roles he's done in his entire life. I had a conversation with Billy literally 10 days ago. There was a 35th anniversary screening of Demon Knight at the Culver Theater in Culver City here in Los Angeles. And there's Q&A afterwards, and Billy took questions. And he approached me afterwards, as he has several times, and said, we should figure out a way to do a sequel to this. And unfortunately, a sequel is kind of impossible because of the rights issues. But it would not be impossible to take Billy's character, the essence of Billy's character, and create something new starting there. I mean, you can't call him the Collector, and you can't, you got to find new mythology. But the thing that I think Billy really loved about playing the character is that it dips so deeply into him. His character in Demon Knight really reflects a lot of, well, Billy brought a lot to the table. It was an interesting character setup, and he filled it with an awful lot of him, which is really what you want an actor to do. The last thing you ever want an actor to do on camera is act. The camera will see the acting and will have to cut it all out. The camera is right there in their face. Acting is essential. If you're doing a play, the people in the back row have to see and hear you. So yes, you have to act. But like I said, the camera's right there.
In your face.
It's right in your face. And it really is a bullshit meter. It sees all artifice, and it translates the artifice right through to the audience. The microphone works exactly the same way. So what I hired actors to do is be themselves, as nakedly, emotionally speaking, as they possibly can at key moments.
To show how realistic the picture is and the acting, because if they intertwine their inner being with the actor, the character that they're playing, it kind of gives more realism to the viewer.
They have to be at that moment. When the script says you have to be sad, they can't act sad. They have to be sad. It's different.
Exactly. You have to really fall into it.
And so Billy is a wonderful villain in Titanic and in Demon Knight. Not because there's something villainous about Billy. No, I wouldn't say villainous, but dark. And Billy is very good at tapping into the darkness, the egomania that, hey, is part of the requirements if you wanted to be a successful actor. But he understands how to tap into his inner darkness and transmit it through the camera to the audience. He's not acting anything, he's being. And that's why he's very good at doing what he does, because he understands how to be for the camera.
That's excellent advice right there. Especially for people who are going into drama, they want to get a good idea of what the correct approach is when it comes to acting, at a low level and eventually to a high level. I think that was very, very valuable advice you're sharing. I really do.
As for Jada, all right, Jada's a terrific actor, a terrific performer. I think she gave a great performance in Demon Knight.
She did.
She showed up on set the first day. Did not tell us. Well, apparently she told Ernest she was going to do it, but she never told the producers that she had dyed her hair platinum blonde.
I remember that.
Cut it super short and platinum blonde. And I didn't know about that when I showed up on the first day on set, which is the location out near Lake Piru. And that was a shock, because usually, you discuss that with us, but I got Joel on the phone. I said, just so you know, Jada's walked on set with platinum hair. He went, oh, if that's what she wants to do, that's what she wants to do. And which is Joel's attitude toward the talent. If that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. And that's what they're going to do. So, me today, the person and the producer I am today would have had a perfectly good relationship with Jada, but I would have had a great relationship with Jada. And yeah, the fact that she showed up on set without, she told the director, and the director should have told the producer. So yeah, a lot of things would be done differently, but sometimes you have to make your life's voyage. You have to travel all the places, dark and light and dark. You have to hit all those places to come out the other side and become the person that you need to be. And that's fairly reflective of my journey. Demon Knight was very successful, and Universal Pictures said, okay, let's do the second movie. The mandate, like I said, was do 3 completely different movies. Gil and I said, neither of us came out of horror. We We did not want the town to see us as one trick ponies who could just do horror when that wasn't really what we came out of. So for the second Crypt feature that Gil was going to direct and we were writing, we wanted to do something completely different from the first movie and completely different from a horror movie. Really, we had developed a script called Dead Easy. And Dead Easy was a taut psychological thriller about a recovered memory. It took place in the swamps outside New Orleans. A wonderful franchise villain, this Harlequin character, a great franchise character. Universal Pictures, the studio, must have been on board because we were spending their money. That 6 months in New Orleans prepping the movie. We were casting. We hired a young unknown actress named Salma Hayek to play the female lead.
Mm-hmm.
We were locations and putting everything together. And then 3 weeks before the start of principal photography in New Orleans, Universal Pictures pulled the plug. They called us. They said, "Stop! Don't spend another penny. Come home. You're not making that movie." And we flew from New Orleans back to Los Angeles, and they stuck this script under our noses. It was called Bordello of Blood. They said
the unpredictability of it's amazing.
Well, they said your release date hasn't changed. You still start shooting in 3 weeks. Get cracking, guys. You got a lot of work to do. Now, where did Bordello of Blood come from? At about the time that all this was happening, a brand new studio had come into being called DreamWorks. And that was Steven Spielberg leaving his deal at Universal, not the lot. He stayed on the lot at Universal, but leaving his deal at Universal and becoming a new studio. And like a new studio would have to do, he began to make talent deals. Universal was desperately afraid of losing another big piece of talent. One of my executive producers, Robert Zemeckis. Steven Spielberg was his mentor. Universal approached Bob. They said, "Bob, we love you at Universal. What can we do to make you stay?" And obviously, whatever deal they put together, Bob stayed. I don't know any other part of the deal. I know one deal point that made Bob stay. Universal Pictures agreed to buy the first student script that Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale, the future Back to the Future guys, wrote when they were film school students at USC for $500,000. It was called Bordello of Blood. It was just a deal point, a way to put more money in Bob's pocket. No one had any intention of making that movie until Universal sat there thinking afterwards, wait a minute, are we just going to eat this $500,000? Bob's about to executive produce that other horror movie, that Dead Easy thing. We spent, $50,000 on that? Screw it. We'll take it out of their budget. Guys, you're going to make Bordello of Blood instead. It's got Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale's names on it. That's bigger than Alan Katz and Gil Adler, isn't it? Get to work, guys. You start in 3 weeks. And so Gil and I and the whole Crypt creative team, we went from making a project that we had spent a year and a half working on, developing, and it was in our souls. And instead of that movie, we were going to make a student movie because of a deal point. Well, do not be surprised if you're going to make anything, let alone a creative endeavor, for the most cynical of reasons. Do not be surprised when every day is stupider than the day before it, which is exactly what happened. And the making of Bordello of Blood was the antithesis of the creative experience of making Tales from the Crypt. Everything that was right about Crypt, everything that we did right making Tales from the Crypt, we got wrong. We got completely wrong making Bordello of Blood. In fact, once the studio made that terrible, cynical decision, everyone lost their minds. The executive producers, Joel especially, lost his mind. And suddenly our movie did not matter. And other things seemed to matter more. Every significant creative decision we made thereafter pretty much was stupid, bad, wrong, impractical, and bound to bite us in the ass, which it did. The reason that we made Bordello of Blood in Vancouver isn't because there's something in Vancouver that we needed to make the movie. The reason we made Bordello in Vancouver is because Joel, our executive producer, who was always walking point when the deal making came to be done, he was always at war with the IA, the union that represented our crew. And sometimes Joel was winning the battle, and sometimes the IA was winning the battle. Well, the IA was winning the battle now at that particular point because they had struck a TV movie that we were making for Fox. They shut down the set, and Joel's attitude was, screw me, no, screw you. So rather than make Bordello of Blood in Los Angeles with our crew, we took it to Vancouver, the closest place where there was some degree of production. And this was back in the mid 90s, before it became the real terrific production hub it is now. We went to Vancouver simply to say screw you to the IA. Now, all right, Vancouver is an okay place to produce your movie. It's a great place now, but it was an okay place then. But the problem was, we're making a horror movie, and it's July. Mm-hmm. And one of your stocks in trade making a horror movie is night, because most horror movies take place during the night. When you're in Vancouver in July, that far north, one of the things you don't have a whole lot of is night, because it doesn't get, well, the sun really doesn't leave the northern sky until pretty close to midnight. And then it starts to appear in the northern sky, the first traces of sunlight, around 4 a.m. So
you guys had to adjust to that.
So you can adjust to that. A film day is 13 hours. You can't magically cram a 13-hour film day into 4 hours. You can't. You've compromised yourself. We made a stupid decision that it took whole big chunks out of our ass. Never mind bit our ass. Mm-hmm. Utter madness. But again, we didn't go to Vancouver for an organic reason. We went for a totally inorganic reason. And then Joel he insisted on casting the 3 leads. Mm-hmm. And even rewriting the script was deeply problematic, because it was written by film school students. The hero of Bordello of Blood is a small town detective. Now, ask yourself, how much business can a detective actually do in a small town? Not enough to be a small town detective. No such person exists.
The logic is there. So,
well, as you go to write the character, you have to justify. There's got to be a history. He didn't just plop himself down and go, "I'm a small town detective." There's a road this person took to get there. How do you write that character's road? It doesn't exist. Anything you write is going to be bullshit. Mm-hmm. Well, there's nothing to be done to fix that character. And still, we had gotten Danny, one of the Baldwins, Danny Baldwin. We wanted Danny Baldwin. I think he'd agreed to play the part. But Joel said no. He insisted on Dennis Miller. And to this day, I could not tell you why Dennis Miller. Our audience was into special effects makeup. That's what they were there for. Mm-hmm. Dennis Miller had basically a political,
like a comedian
show, a chat show on HBO. Our audience, we did not have the same audience.
Right.
And so why you would, well, Dennis didn't want to do the movie either. And when he was approached, he said to Joel, "All right, I'll do it for $1 million," figuring no one in their right mind would pay Dennis Miller $1 million to be in their feature film. He'd done a couple features before then. We knew what his quote was. He got scale. Why would you pay Dennis Miller $1 million, more than anyone ever paid him to be in a movie, to be in our movie, when he's not even someone that our audience cares about? Where's that decision coming from?
Exactly.
Well, we didn't have $1 million in our $12 million budget to pay for that actor. We had $500,000 to pay for that part. We went to Universal. We said, "Hey, can we get a little breakage here, some help to pay for our lead actor?" They said, "We don't know why you're casting him. We think it's a stupid idea." No, you can't get any help. And so we took that extra money where it was in the budget, special effects and makeup. I took $500,000 off the screen to instead of paying for the thing the audience wanted to see, we used it to pay for an actor they didn't care about. Why would you make that decision? Now, Erica, I understood. Joel thought he could have some kind of relationship with her, but she was involved in a long-term relationship. And as soon as she accepted the part of Bordello of Blood for $500,000, which was more money than we had $250,000. Joel offered her $500,000 because she didn't want to do it. And she didn't want to do it because she didn't want to be that kind of actress in this kind of movie anymore, which she told us after she got hired. Normally, well, Gil, like I said, is a terrific producer, and whether he's producing or directing and producing, he likes to start work on a Thursday. And the reasoning is you get 2 days in. If you suddenly discover you got a problem with the script or some other production problem with an actor, maybe you should think about replacing. You have the weekend to figure all that stuff out. You hit the ground Monday morning for your first full week of work with hopefully most, if not all, the problems sorted out. So, per usual, we started shooting Bordello of Blood up in Vancouver on a Thursday and Friday. And then we fully expected that Erica Leniak would be on an airplane Saturday to be settling in on Sunday, to be in wardrobe on Monday, to work on Tuesday. On Saturday, I get a call from her manager telling me she's not getting on an airplane anytime until we agree to rewrite the script per her. I'm not sure. She doesn't want to be that kind of action, this kind of movie. The character was originally written was called Chesty O'Toole. She was a former porn star, and she didn't want to play a former porn star. Well, if she's not a former porn star, I pointed out to the manager, that's going to screw up a whole bunch of stuff in the movie we're already shooting. Finally, I talked the manager down to a point where we agreed, okay, she's a former plus size porno star who used to be called Chubby O'Toole, who is now unrecognizable. Now, why that was better than what was originally there, I don't know. I think this was really a case of the manager of Erica saying, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this kind of part anymore. He said, look, I'll get them to rewrite it for you. And he was just trying to show, I got him to rewrite it. It didn't matter. It almost didn't matter. This was an all various exercises in bullshit. But she agreed to take she finally agreed to come up. And so she flew on Sunday and was there to in wardrobe on Monday to work on Tuesday. But she made it explicitly clear every single moment that she was there that she didn't want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
She was not a fun person to be around. Dennis was incredibly unfun to be around. Within about 10 minutes of getting to Vancouver, it's amazing. And he was married to a woman from Vancouver. He had our entire Canadian crew hating his guts. It is quite remarkable how quickly and efficiently he managed to do that.
Yeah.
As for the villain of our piece, Angie, we had wanted to hire Robin Gibbons, and I think Robin would have given us a great performance. Yeah, at least there'd have been some meat on the character's bones. As I said, we were shooting the movie in Vancouver, and at the same time that we were shooting Bordello of Blood in Vancouver, Joel was executive producing another movie that Dick Donner, my other executive producer, was directing, a thing called Assassins with Antonio Banderas and Sylvester Stallone. They were shooting in Seattle. And one day on the set in Seattle, apparently Stallone approached Joel and said, hey, Joel, here we making a movie in Vancouver. Why don't you put my girlfriend Angie in your movie? That way we can visit each other across the border. And Joel, instead of being a responsible executive producer and saying, that's a great idea, Sly, but let me check with the guys to make sure it works for them, he said, that's a great idea, Sly, period. And he committed us to hiring as the villain in our movie an actress, the girlfriend of the actor on one movie, the other movie be damned. Now, this is not a knock on Angie. Angie is a lovely person, but she was not an actress. We did not hire her because Joel saw something and said, I think she's going to be amazing. Trust me, trust my creative instincts here. That was not why we hired Angie. We hired her to make Sylvester Stallone happy. Now, it turned out that, and we did everything we could to convince Joel and Sylvester not to do this, not just to us, but to Angie. We did a screen test and we sent that to them, and we thought, surely Sylvester Stallone will not want to do this to the woman he loves or says he loves. Like I said, I never hired an actor to act. Billy Zane's a great villain because he can be. Angie, even if she had been a trained actor, which she was not, the problem is she's a lovely human being. There is nothing villainous inside Angie. Nothing. And so even if she'd been a trained actress, to go play a villain, she'd have to rely on a tremendous acting technique, none of which she had. She had nothing to tap into. And so therefore, all Angie could do was act her heart out to be the villain in the movie, which is exactly what she does. It's not a knock on her, nothing to do with her whatsoever. We hired someone who really did not have the qualifications to do the job we hired them for. That's not on her, it's on us. And we didn't hire her for any good reason, only for a bad reason. Now, what made it even worse was that Stallone had an ulterior motive. He intended to break up with her, and we were going to be the consolation prize, which we were. And when he broke up with her 2/3 of the way through the movie, he said to her, "Hey, I got your movie, didn't I?" Now, when we first started shooting, as I said, the original deal was, "Hey, Joe, why don't you put my girlfriend in your movies? We can visit each other across the border." Well, that's what we made happen the first 2 weekends. Our production office would coordinate with the Assassins production office in Seattle to get Angie from our set across the border to Sylvester Stallone, and then back when the weekend was over to, back across the border to our set in time to do her work. That happened two weekends. And then as the third weekend approached, our production office got a call from their production office. They said, "Hey, could you hold Angie this weekend?" Hold her to do what? Her homework? No, can't hold Angie. And suddenly we began to hear stories about what Sly was doing on that set. He was fooling around behind Angie's back. And that whole production office knew what Sly was doing. And our production office knew. And since our production office knew, I knew. And so I walked around keeping a secret from Angie that I knew the man she loved was being incredibly disloyal and unfaithful to her. Now, there's a story. It's a rather blue story. I don't know about your podcast. How blue do you want to go on your story, Michael? How blue do you want to go on your podcast?
I'll let you be the judge of that.
Okay. All right. In that case, then I'm going to go to town on it. Okay. I'm going to go to town. All right. So this is a story about Sylvester Stallone. He has never denied that the story is true. The question has only ever been on what film set did this take place. I can tell you, I've never heard this story before. I heard it from my production office, who heard it from the production office in Seattle. So I would tell you pretty unequivocally, this must have happened on the Assassin set. Stallone finishes a scene. He goes back to his trailer, unaware of the fact that his wireless lavalier mic is still broadcasting to the sound card. And there's a young woman waiting for Stallone in his trailer, and she proceeds to give him a blowjob. And apparently Sly is rather particular about how he likes his Hummers. And now people are gathering around the sound card as they hear Stallone going, "Yeah, that's right. Stroke the shaft, cup the balls. Yeah, cup the balls, stroke the shaft." The next day, Stallone shows up on set. The entire crew are wearing T-shirts that say, "Cup the balls, stroke the shaft." Stallone has never denied that the story happened, that it's true. The question has only ever been on what set, and I would tell you, like I said, it was Assassins. That's what was happening behind Angie's back. Making that movie was personally disastrous. Everything that was great about making Crypt was terrible about making Bordello of Blood. When we flew home, we did not have a finished movie, and we had to do some reshoots. We Our original release date was the following Halloween. We could have been ready for that, but Universal didn't care anymore. They held us until the following August. They released us in the doldrums of August. By the time the movie was released, we had done the last season of Tales from the Crypt in London while Gil was still cutting the show. And we got back from London. We were supposed to start doing a new show for HBO called, it would be a science fiction show. That ultimately became Perversions of Science. But at some point during the negotiations with Joel to do Perversions, he decided he didn't want me on the show. And he said, nah, I don't want you on the show. Get out of here. You're gone. You're fired.
Wow.
And I thought Gil would walk with me, being my partner of 10 years, my
Right.
best
Because
friend.
you had such a great system, from the beginning, getting all the way to that point,
But he didn't. And, creative relationships are like marriages. And when they fail, they can fail catastrophically, which is what happened. Gil and I didn't speak for 25 years. Gil went on to have a very successful career as a very big producer at Warner Brothers. He did all their tentpole movies, things like Superman Returns. I'm going up on all his movies, but I did some huge tentpole movies with Tom Cruise. I did a couple of seasons on The Outer Limits, shooting again in Vancouver, but I really ended up in a 2-decade-long descent into a deepening depression and a writer's block I didn't even know I was in. And Bordello really, the experience of making Bordello undermined not just my confidence, but it really diverted my career away from a moment where it should have been take off and do what you want, to crash and burn.
Right.
I fell off the mountain and I couldn't get back on, and that was incredibly depressing. 3 days before Christmas 2016, it got so bad I came within literal inches of killing myself. And I knew I was headed into a very dark place, and I knew I needed a mood stabilizer. But I grew up in the medical culture. My dad was a surgeon, and I knew that my GP, he had no experience and no knowledge of mood stabilizers. I mean, under the best of circumstances, it's a chemistry experiment. 6 to 8 weeks, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Where my GP was concerned, really the likelihood was the last pharmaceutical rep who walked through the office, if he said, "Hey, got any depressed patients? Try them out on some of this. This is what we make. See if it works for them." Like I said, it's a lab experiment. I didn't want to be a lab experiment where none of the boxes were checked off. So I had done some research, and I went to my GP. I said, "Look, here's what I just almost did, and here's the medication I've researched that I think would work for me. Would you please write the prescription?" He whipped out his smartphone. He looked it up. He said, "Yeah, okay, that makes sense." He wrote the prescription. I picked it up, went home, told my family what I was going to do, took that first dose, and then I got incredibly lucky. Within 36 hours, I leveled.
Great.
I felt the medication put the darkness that was this self-loathing rage into a cage where I could still see it. It could still see me. I know it's there, but it couldn't get at me anymore.
It's contained.
And because it couldn't get at me anymore, I could finally confront the secret that I've been keeping from myself for 45 years, the reason for all that self-loathing rage. And when I was 14, I was sexually molested twice by the religious director at the synagogue where my family belonged outside of Baltimore. Now, the first time was bad, of course, but for me, it was the second time that really did the worst damage. The second time happened because I didn't say anything the first time. And so while the second time was happening inside my 14-year-old brain, I said, "This is your fault. You did this." Now, that wasn't true. It was not 14-year-old me's fault that an adult was using me as a sex toy. That was bullshit. But you're 14, and our emotions aren't necessarily logical.
You're not really fully developed,
And even as an adult, something can happen, and you'll think of it one way when you should think of it another way. Be that as it may, the template was set, and suddenly that became, I took the blame for everything, even stuff that I had no business taking the blame for. And when you try to solve problems that way, you don't solve the problems. Really, you're not helping anybody. But that became the template, and the self-loathing rage began to build and build and build. But now that I could, well, let me tell you, it is true what they say about the truth setting you free. And when I finally confronted and told myself the truth about what happened to me, well, if you can't tell your own story to yourself, can you really tell anybody else's story? No, you can't. And when I suddenly could tell my own story to me with balls to the wall honesty, well, I could tell anybody else's story too. And that became an obsession of a kind, telling stories with absolute honesty. During the pandemic, a Tales from the Crypt fan group, three guys from different parts of the country, they started a podcast called Dads from the Crypt. They rated all the episodes of Tales from the Crypt and gave parenting advice. One of the dads, Jason, reached out to me. He said, "We're going to be reviewing one of the episodes you wrote. You want to sit in with us?" I said, "That sounds like fun. Sure, let's do it." And it was fun. And a few weeks later, Jason reached out again. He said, "We're going to be reviewing Bordello of Blood. You want to sit in again?" And I said, "Jason, the story I'm making of that fucking movie is not a 30-second chat with you guys. It's a podcast unto itself." And that was the impetus for the first season of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, The Making of Bordello of Blood. I suddenly realized what I had to do. I had to tell that story in this medium. Now, the goal was to tell the story with balls to the wall honesty. There were 3 people I needed to call out. Dennis, we're paying you $1 million, dude. You don't have to be an asshole. Sylvester, for the reasons I explained, and I needed to call out me. And it was really that lack of confidence. Well, what happened to me when I was 14 disconnected me from me. I really was not in connection with myself anymore. I was keeping a secret from myself. When suddenly I reconnected to me, that too was a revelation.
It's pretty tough.
When I decided I was going to make this podcast and tell the balls to the wall story, I was going to have to get back in touch with Gil. And we hadn't talked in 25 years. The breakup was really bad. And I reached out to him. I said, "Look, here's what I want to do. I want to do a podcast. I want to tell the whole story of the making of Bordello of Blood and what happened afterwards, all the bad stuff too." And I said, "Look, I don't want to talk about it beforehand. I want to, whatever happens, whatever we say, but I want to do it live on mic. Are you down with it?" Then he hemmed and he hawed. He thought, "Oh, that sounds kind of dangerous, but okay, let's do it." And that's what we did. We told the story about the making of that movie and what happened afterwards to our relationship with tremendous honesty. And lo and behold, it because we did that. Well, first of all, Entertainment Weekly called that first season of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast the best film podcast of 2022. And what Clark Collis, the writer of the piece in Entertainment Weekly, especially what he was responding to in particular was the honesty of the piece. Getting back in touch with Gil to tell the story, it rekindled our friendship. It rekindled our creative relationship. We're working on a couple of things as we speak. It was wonderful. The process. Well,
Custard and Touchstone is the name of your podcast.
Is the name of my podcast company. Custard and Touchstone. In my very brief acting career after college, I performed in two Shakespearean parts in Shakespearean plays. I played the part of Costard in Love's Labour's Lost, and I played the part of Touchstone in As You Like It. And both
Mm.
those characters are wise fools who speak truth to power.
Wow.
So when I formed my little podcasting company, I want my stories absolutely blistering truthful storytelling, but truth to power also.
Mhm.
I ended up doing 4 seasons of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. After the first season, it was really it's a nuts and bolts conversation with everyone I knew from the business. I did the pleasures of the craft of making movies and TV shows, and what happens when the craft sometimes turns to crap. While during the second or third season, a friend of mine from school approached me with a story he wanted to turn into a TV series, an absolute true story that happened to him. And when he told me the story, I said, all right, first, you do not want to turn this into a movie or a TV series because, one, they'll never let you do it the way that you have to tell this story. But even under any other circumstances, you take an idea and turn it into a TV series, for instance. Take it from my head, turn it into a series. Well, the scripts take years to write. Years. The average is 10 from inception to production. 10 years. Let's say, okay, you get this done in 4 or 5 years. Get the script written. Well, all right, now you got the script written. You're going to do a TV series. Well, you wrote season 1, episode 1. What happens in episodes 2, 3, 4, 5? What happens the whole first season? What happens season 2, season 3? What are all the story arcs? And who are all these characters? Please tell me who they all are. What's the tone of this and the tone of that? What are things going to look like? Well, all that goes into what's called a Bible. And that's going to be 50, 60, 70 pages of incredible detail about the world your show is going to take place in. Well, that doesn't write itself. That's another year, really, to get that right. And as you're working on that and the scripts begin to rewrite each other because you're adding stuff that, you got to update the script. Oh, we update the script. Now I got to update the Bible. It's a constant process. That could take another 2 years. All right, 5, 6, now you're into 7 years. Now you're ready for the marketplace just to get the apes in the executive suites to read your material, to induce them just to read it. You have to create a pitch deck. That's a PowerPoint presentation. It's the comic book version. A couple of scant words here and images, basically to convey to them, what's it about? Should I waste my time reading this? And if they say yes to developing it, that's just the opening of the meat grinder. Now there's still thousands of ways and thousands of assholes standing in your way who can kill it dead at any point just because they're an asshole. And that's not to say what the hell kind of sausage is going to come out the other end of this sphincter. If you're lucky enough, and the ape in the executive suite says, okay, let's put this into development, the first thing they're going to make you, the writer, do is sign a certificate of authorship. It has to do with the nature of film and TV distribution. You can't have one dickhead like a writer suddenly going, well, I don't agree to the rights about that. I don't want to do that. You got to have all the rights. And so a certificate of authorship is you, the writer, giving up all your rights in perpetuity throughout the known universe. You don't own nothing anymore. The moment that they pay you $1, you lose all ownership. All right. If I take that same idea and I want to turn it into, say, a podcast, well, I can write, produce, distribute, monetize, and collect on that monetization all by myself. And at the end of that process, I still own it 100%. And I will have told the story exactly the way I want to tell it. I've had no executive because he doesn't understand the story I'm telling, or because he's a coward. They are a coward. I no such thing. I will have told the story exactly the way I wanted to tell it. Half of what you're trying to do when you create all this material for an executive, you're trying to convey what's the IP, the intellectual property. What's the IP? What's the franchise?
Right.
That's really the whole dance. If I do it as a podcast, well, I put the IP in the podcast. Everyone knows what the IP is now. The audience, the advertisers, because if I've done the content the way I think I can and should, yeah, I'll get an audience. I'll get advertisers. We say that making podcasts, we say it costs nothing. That's not true. They do cost money. Our time is and our talents are worth money. But
Yeah, because you're constantly having to think of good content to share with the audience, to keep them
but
enticed.
because one can do everything, like I said, write, produce, distribute,
Mhm.
and distribution really that was always the problem. Make your own TV show. How are you going to get people to see it? Well, now, hey, I use Acast, and that's my host, and they do all that. I upload an MP3. The next thing I know, everyone all over the world can see it. And like I said, I can monetize and collect on the monetization, and I still own everything. All right. My friend approached me with an idea, and I said, "You do not want to do this as a TV series. You want to do it as a podcast." And my friend, let's call him Hal. He worked his
Sure.
way through medical school in the 90s as an anonymous sperm donor. Jump forward 27 years. He was a successful radiologist. He joined 23andMe, curious about his health genes. It never occurred to him the ramifications of adding his DNA to a growing DNA database. That's what 23andMe and Ancestry are. They're DNA databases. He lost his donor anonymity. Suddenly, 7 total strangers found Daddy, except 6 of them had no idea their actual biological father was this guy, Hal, a sperm donor. I got a taste for weird stories, yeah? Well, I had never heard a story as absolutely twisted as Hal's, and it was absolutely true. And Hal agreed to let me tell his story because he couldn't tell his story. He had keep his name private and protect the names of a lot of different people in the story. I said, but let me tell your story. And if I keep your identity private, I'm not being obtuse. I'm actually being the referee. Telling Hal's story in the donor a DNA the donor a DNA horror story. That was my first story podcast. It's 7 episodes, start to finish. I really loved the intimacy of the storytelling process, of telling a story in this medium, and not just people talking. There's the interview, but there's also deep dive into various different topics where a lot of produced segments, and I love doing that. Doing the background research on the donor conceived community, I had no idea such a thing existed. I met a woman named Donna Hall who gave me great background. Donna learned when she was 40 that she was donor conceived, which was shattering to her. But when Donna told me her story, an amazing story, I said, Donna, you're a podcast unto yourself. She said, yeah, I know. I've been trying to do it. But Donna's an example of even a great story has to be told the right way to be a great story.
Mm-hmm.
Donna, ultimately, that podcast became The Hall Closet. Donna grew up in the mid-90s in a lower tier crime family outside of Philadelphia. The Halls weren't the Corleones from the Godfather movies, but they made national headlines just the same. Donna's mom, Phyllis, might just be the worst mom ever. She spent 6 months in prison for child endangerment. Donna's stepdad, John Hall, a true criminal mastermind. He was the Philadelphia Police Department's favorite snitch. He put more than 25 people behind bars based on bullshit confessions he concocted to mitigate his own considerable legal jeopardy. Among the people he put behind bars, his own stepson, Herb, who spent 18 months awaiting trial for a murder he did not commit. Another person that John Hall put away was named Walter Ogrod. Walter spent 24 years on death row in Pennsylvania for a murder Walter did not commit. When Pennsylvania finally let Walter out, they gave him $9.1 million to make up for their fuck up. Donna, in her podcast, tells the story of what it was like growing up in this madhouse of a family where every single day, literally one or more of the adults was doing something insanely criminal. She's a wonderful storyteller. she's she's vivacious. She's funny. Her story really is a trip to safety and empowerment, really, ultimately. Well, while I was telling her story, I realized I really had become the thing I always wanted to be when I grew up, which is a podcaster. I didn't want to tell stories in any other way. This is the medium in which I want to work. I film and TV are completely uninteresting to me going forward. And Costard and Touchstone, our mission is to make the world a better place through storytelling.
Yeah. Now, Al,
that's my goal.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I have some questions to ask you, and you shared a lot with me and my viewers. I appreciate that. The complexities and difficulties involved in getting a production up and running, especially the nightmarish experience with Bordello of Blood. That was catastrophic, but the one before it was a success with Billy Zane and J. Pinkett Smith. Thank God. Okay. And that worked out, and you guys had festivals and celebrating the anniversary of that movie. You guys had fun, I'm sure. Okay. So Al, we understand how and who influenced you in going into the podcast industry. I want to ask you, what made you want to be a television writer right from the beginning, way back before everything you said?
I've always been a writer. That's that's a skill set I always had. I've been writing professionally since I was 16.
Amazing.
It's the first time anyone ever paid me to write, and I always took that for granted. I became a TV writer when I went to Vassar. When I went to school, I was a drama major. I thought I was going to be an actor. I took writing for granted. I went to one audition after Vassar, and I was terrible. I was just awful. But I walked out of it, and I said to myself, what kind of an idiot makes their living this way? I'm going to go just be a writer instead. Bigger idiot. But and I swore to myself I would not act again until someone asked me nicely, which is what I did. The couple times I've acted since, I did an episode of America's Most Wanted because the director was a friend. He said, "Hey, you want to be in it?" And I went, "Oh, I don't know." I said, "Oh, come on, man, be in it." I went, "Okay." And then I was in an episode of Tales from the Crypt because the director, Mick Garris, knew I was pissed off at him because of a casting choice he made without asking me first. And to make it up to me, he said, "Hey, you want to play the part of Iggy in the episode?" I went, "I don't know, man." He said, "Oh, come on, man, do it." And I went, "Okay." So I gave up on being an actor and became a writer. I had a friend from where I grew up in Baltimore who had become an agent, a literary agent at William Morris in Los Angeles, Carol Yumkis. Carol, I spoke to her one day. She said, "You should try writing a screenplay since you're writing now." And I'd been thinking about writing a screenplay, so I did. And I sent it to Carol. She said, "This is quite good. You should come out and meet and greet people." In June 1985, I flew out for a week to Los Angeles just to meet and greet people. I was a total, I didn't grow up a New Yorker, but I thought I was about to become a New Yorker. I was living in New York and I wanted to be in New York. New York was the center of the universe. To me, Los Angeles was the stupidest fucking place on the whole planet. It was the land of the avocado head. I said to, like I said, I flew out for a week and it shocked me. First of all, June in New York on the East Coast, it's hot, it's humid. In New York, every place smells like piss. In LA, well, gosh, it's the desert. There's no humidity, and every day is beautiful and sunny. And it was a lot less crowded 40 years ago when I came out the first time, and it was beautiful. And people were so incredibly nice to me. Blew copious amounts of smoke up my ass. One night, Carol took me to a movie premiere, St. Elmo's Fire. William Morris represented it. Yep. My view of the whole thing was from the backstage, and it was quite intoxicating. I had the next morning off. I didn't have any meetings. Someone at the party after the screening said, "You should take a drive through Topanga Canyon. It's really, really lovely." And the next morning, having no meetings, I took a drive through Topanga Canyon, which is it's a part of Los Angeles. It's within the city limits. It was a lot less crowded then than it is now. But you drive from the 101, the freeway, through the Santa Monica Mountains, through this narrow mountain pass, and you get to the water at Pacific Coast Highway. It's beautiful. By the time I got to the PCH, I was sold. I screw New York. I was moving to Los Angeles. LA had completely seduced me. I drove out the next month, and among the very first people that I met that first week was Gil Adler, who became my writing partner and my best friend. And that's
There
how
it
it all
is.
happened.
There it is. Now, my next question to you, and you covered a lot of ground, which is great. Now, all of us have influences in order to get where we want to be in this life. I've had many of my influences, as a writer, is Richard Matheson, one of the core writers of the Twilight Zone.
Sure.
Okay. And a few others as well. Now, let me ask you this. Who are your biggest influences, both within and outside of the horror genre?
Well, like I said, the horror genre wasn't really where I came from, but one of my favorite movies is a horror movie. But not what most people might think of as a horror movie, but to me, it's absolutely a horror movie. Don't Look Now, Nicholas Rogue's Don't Look Now. It's man, that ending is as horrifying as anything.
The plot twist.
Brilliant movie, wonderfully shot. Yeah. So that movie actually had a fair amount of influence on me, and I guess it is a horror movie, but to me, it's a psychological thriller.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the characters. It's about who those people are. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is one of my other favorite movies. What wonderful writing. Paddy Chayefsky's Network is another movie that, wow, what writing. One of the only book I ever wrote to grasp how to write a screenplay was William Goldman's Adventures in the Screen Trade, in which is the entire screenplay for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which is unlike most other screenplays. You don't follow any damn rules. Take your rules and screw yourself. He's just a great storyteller who understands the characters and how their story needs to be told. There's no formula to it. Mm-hmm. Nothing wrong with the formula, but William Goldman was such a wonderful writer. He didn't need formulas at all. Butch Cassidy is a wonderful screenplay. So usually for me, it's going to start with great writing. Other things, yeah.
Well, that was really good. I like that. I liked your answer, and that was a really great answer you had given. I do have a Tales from the Crypt question to ask you.
Go for it.
Now, given the high popularity of the comic book, and I got a volume here containing a few of the old stories from the EC Comics days right here. I read through the stories. They were good. Artwork is good. Awesome. There it is, guys. Tales from the Crypt. We see that it was narrated by three different characters, one of which is the Crypt Keeper, where I covered ground with that. But we also see the Old Witch and the Vault Keeper. Okay. And I believe that's probably so that's owned by DC Comics when they had gone out. Okay. So we'll just leave that at that as that. Now, here's the question. Are there talks of bringing back Tales from the Crypt anthology, or perhaps the animated series? And the reason why I ask this is because I'm looking at it from an economical standpoint. Where
I'm gonna break your heart, Michael. I'm gonna break your heart. Here's the problem. There will never be a remake of Tales from the Crypt.
I was getting that,
and it's a rights issue. All right, The Crypt Keeper in the comic books is an old white guy with stringy hair. As I
Mhm.
said, the Crypt Keeper in the series is a completely separate piece of IP
Mhm.
owned by different people.
Mhm.
The Bill Gaines's estate owns
Mhm.
the EC Comics and the old white guy with stringy hair, Crypt Keeper. The Crypt Partners owned the Crypt Keeper puppet. Now, Tales from the Crypt, the comic books, uh, that's not the franchise. It's the Crypt Keeper. Um,
Correct.
the problem is that among the the executive producers is Joel Silver, and Joel, larger than life personality, also one of the biggest fucking assholes on the planet. Everybody does, and that's not just my opinion. There are lots and lots of movie producer characters who've been based on Joel. Screamers, just
Wow.
insane screamers. Uh, Kevin Spacey in Swimming with Sharks was really the first. The first. You remember the beginning of Roger Rabbit? Roger is making a film, and the director's screaming at him. Well, that director was Joel Silver. Joel Silver played that character as Joel Silver. It was a
So,
huge inside joke, that Bob was doing. Is hey, Joel played Joel, screaming at Roger Rabbit. At some point, most people get to up. Yeah, it occurs to them that life is too short to ever work with Joel ever again.
I see.
And Bill Gaines's family got to that point. They felt that Joel had cheated Bill, and he probably had. The Crypt Partners felt like Joel had been less than honest with them. And so, to make it complicated, the Gaines family would never make a deal with Joel. But even to get Tales from the Crypt streaming was a problem. At the end of the day, Joel's not the problem. Joel's need for money caused him to sell bits and pieces of his rights to Tales from the Crypt to various people. And so, even to make a streaming deal, which actually I think one is coming, I think Lauren Schuler Donner, Dick Donner's widow, she fought the good fight, and it's not just the executive producers who have to make the deal; it's all the people that Joel sold bits and pieces to. They all have to agree too, since they're now part owners of Tales from the Crypt, and so it's gotten super super complicated to make a streaming deal. All right, they might be able to pull that off because it's pre-existing, but to make a new show, absolutely impossible. It will never happen. Sorry to be the bearer of such terrible news. They are divorced forever. Where will the kids go for Christmas? Don't know.
Okay. Great. Okay. So it's a good thing we got that cleared up. All right. And I have another question to ask you. Now, Al, let's step away from Tales from the Crypt and give that a rest. Let's give our Crypt Keeper a rest, okay? And let's discuss your other productions, namely Children of the Corn 2, The Final Sacrifice, Freddy's Nightmares, and you mentioned, I already mentioned, The Outer Limits.
Yeah,
Okay. Now, according to my research, you wrote the screenplay to Children of the Corn 2,
I
which
did.
I find interesting because I had met the American film director Fritz Kirsch a year ago at Days of the Dead, as a horror convention, and we talked. We had a great conversation. Okay, but share with us your experience in making the sequel.
Well, the way that Children of the Corn 2 came about was another dumb Hollywood story. Uh, the producer of Children of the Corn 2 was a guy named Scott Stone. Scott Stone had a fantastic house at the top of the Sunset Strip, at the very top of the hill, with incredible views. Just down the hill from him was a guy named Larry. I'm going up on Larry's last name. But Larry. And Larry was a low budget movie producer. He owned a bunch of properties, things, that he bought the rights to. Well, Larry wanted to put up something on his property that would have partially blocked the view of Scott's property.
Hmm.
And so Larry sent a proposal to Scott, said, look, here's what I want to do. I want to do this. And Scott, knowing that Larry owned a couple of horror properties, said, all right, here's the deal. I'll let you put this up, but you have to put up the money to make, and he said, Children of the Corn 2. And you have to put up the budget for it. And give us the rights and put up the budget. And I guess it was worth it to him to get this thing up next to his house. And so he said yes. And so the reason that Children of the Corn 2 got made is because of a real estate deal. That was what motivated that. Well, once we were up and running, Gil and I started working on the script. As production started to ramp up, though, that's exactly the same time when Gil and I started working on Tales from the Crypt. So we had to bow out of producing Children of the Corn 2. Scott Stone ended up producing it. Scott is a terrific TV producer, not the strongest movie producer. They ended up hiring a young director named David Price. And I don't think David was up to the task. We didn't have too much to do with the making of that because we were too busy doing Tales from the Crypt, but we got dailies from the set, and sometimes the dailies were very disappointing to us. The director was making choices that if we had been there, he would never have made those choices. We would never have let him make those choices. But we were doing something that was bigger than Children of the Corn 2, and we were much happier doing that. So whatever. So that was Freddy's Nightmares.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Katz. To clarify to the viewers, I had name dropped Fritz Kirsch. He was the maker of the original Children of the Corn. I just wanted to clarify that with our viewers. That's all.
I never met the man. I never had anything to do with the man. I know nothing about him.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify with the viewers because I left that detail out. Okay, and I just found it interesting that you had something to do with the sequel, and so that's all. Okay, so Mr. Katz, I just have another question to ask you. Let me see here. All right, let me see here. I enjoyed part 2, by the way. I think Children of the Corn 2 was great, really good. I enjoyed it.
It could have been so much better if it had a director with I don't know, a modicum of talent.
Really? Well, I was really at that point. That was like 1992. So the visual effects were really good. At that time. And they still hold up to this day. 2025. Now, you then got involved in Freddy's Nightmares. I love that series. I met Robert Englund not too long ago in Denver. He's a great person, very sociable. And because the series was so long ago, I only remember one episode, and it had to do with this babysitter, getting tormented by, I guess, this demonic entity, and that's all I remember. But it was really good.
Sounds like Freddy's Nightmares.
Yeah. So, how did that work out?
Freddy's was another strange project. Freddy's first came together just before there was a writer's strike in 1986, I think it was. Oh no, I forget when exactly it was, but it was 89, I think. No, it was 86. I'd be 86. Yeah, the strike in 86. Yeah, it was the strike in 86. They had put together the deal to make the TV series, but because there was a writer's strike, they decided to continue but hire non-union writers. And at that time, I was not in the Writers Guild. Gil was not in the Writers Guild. And so the first 6 episodes were written by non-union writers. And Gil and I wrote the first episode that got made. The way that they were figuring out how they were going to make any money off this thing, the original idea for the hours was that each hour they could split into 2 half hours that would stand as separate half hours. So the way that the stories had to be constructed, each hour had to work as an hour by itself and as 2 separate half hours. So that was kind of a Rubik's Cube way to put a story together, but okay. Then when they ordered the second season, they decided, hey, what if we could sell these as 2-hour movies in Europe? And so every episode was always part of a 2-hour movie 2 1-hour episodes and 4 half-hour episodes. It had to work completely. Each of those pieces had to work as all those different things. It was the craziest story writing because of all those. And I don't think they ever sold any of them as a TV as a movie in Europe ever. I don't think that ever happened. So that was all for naught. But it was a fascinating creative challenge. I think one of the remarkable things was how the sets got done, and that was the first time that I think it was the first time that Gil and a guy named Greg Melton, who did the sets, did all the production design for Tales from the Crypt. Greg is amazing. Doing anthologies, the thing about doing an anthology on a regular series where there are regular characters, regular sets, you don't have to build a lot of sets. Once you've built them the first time, you're going to spend most of your time in those pre-existing sets. In an anthology, you don't have any pre-existing sets. You're reinventing the entire world every single week. And that was Greg's job, was to create a whole world every single week. He did that on Freddy's under tremendous constraints and really no money. It's sheer, well, like I said early on, it's problem solving, the creative process. And the solution really ideally is you throw more creativity at it to solve the problem, not more money. And we started doing that during Freddy's. Yeah. So,
all right. Okay, so let's go move on to your other one here, The Outer Limits. Now, from what I understand, The Outer Limits had gotten, started in the early 60s, and it got canceled and was brought back several times.
Showtime ran it for a bunch of seasons, 5-6 seasons on Showtime. Right. That was a great gig. I spent 2 years in Vancouver over as his co-executive producer on 44 episodes of that. That was a wonderful experience. I loved working in Vancouver. I got hired because I'm not a horror guy. I'm not a sci-fi guy. I was the outside the box choice, and they allowed me to do all kinds of stuff that, really fun episodes like What Will the Neighbors Think, where Jane Addams plays a woman who can suddenly see and hear what all of her neighbors are thinking, and she begins to plot against them all. And that was so much fun. I mean, it's science fiction light, but they allowed me to really to be as creative as I wanted to be. And hey, it's fun making sci-fi projects, spaceships and stories that take place in worlds that don't exist except in your own head. That's a very pleasant experience. Although it's funny, we would all agree as we would sit in the writer's room that the one story that we should just not bother with, just avoid because of all the logic problem pitfalls, was a time loop story. And one of the other writers was a guy named Narain Shankar, who went on to do a lot of the CSI shows. Narain, very talented writer. And Narain was always the loudest, screaming about, the thing about the sci-fi audience is they're really smart. I mean, the horror audience is smart too, but the sci-fi audience, they're all about science logic. And if you screw with science logic, they will turn on you. They will turn on you. They will hate your guts, and you'll never get them back. And one of the most dangerous places to play in is a time loop, because you got to get all the details right. And there's usually a logic problem that's going to come and catch up with you. But Narain suddenly pitched a time loop story, and he looked at me. He said, "You got to write this with me." So I had a good time writing that time loop story with Narain. Yeah, it was great fun. Yeah, taking what I do and merging it with what they did.
And it turned out to be a good product,
Most of the time, I think so.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a Twilight Zone fan, so which makes me automatically an Outer Limits fan. All right. So, Mr. Katz, before we wrap it up, okay, what would be your advice, your best advice to give to the one who aspires to become or to be a television writer like you?
TV's tough right now. It's a very tough business to break into. That's why I would suggest write it as a podcast first. That's my advice, because you're going to go through a development process anyway. You might as well come out with a finished product. Hey, if you can tell the story as a screenplay, you can tell the story as a podcast. You can then produce it and tell the story exactly the way you want it without ever losing ownership. Ownership is everything. And unfortunately, because of the nature of the film and TV beast, the writer, unless you're a writer producer, where yes, then you have the power. But for the most part, the writer is the least powerful person in the whole universe, of necessity, because it's the script is really just the floor plan. The building is going to transcend the script in myriad ways. It's going to be filled in all the blanks that the script can't fill in, because it's kind of two-dimensional that way.
Right.
Podcasting, here's the other thing. A lot of my podcasts that I make, and I've got 6 out in the world right now, they would make great TV series. I know this. But I know the problems of approaching the TV business with these ideas as TV episodes. I'm going to have to sell these people the IP. Whereas if I put it in the podcast, well, and I don't have to sell the IP. In the old days, to sell the IP, I would have had to go cap in hand to all those executive suites to try to convey to them what the IP is. Well, now they know what the IP is. I put it in the podcast. And instead of me going to them, cash in hand, going, oh, please buy, they're going to come to me and they're going to say, hey, the donor, Dead Drop, Hall Closet, that would make a great TV series. And I'm going to say, oh my God, you're right. Yeah, it would make a great TV series. And they're going to say, hey, yeah, we got this check here. And I'm going to look at the check. I'm going to say, well, that's pretty, but you're going to have to add some zeros, move the decimal point over because you have competition. Get this crap out of here. Because I have ownership, I have all the power in that negotiation, and the power is in the word no. I can say, I don't want to do this with you. I've already told the story. You're not, either your money is not sufficient or you're not sufficient. And because that's where the power is, they're going to want to make it that much more. They're going to say, oh, okay, I don't care if you hate me. Here's more money. It's the power. By doing it as a podcast where you have all the power, rather than doing it as a script where you have literally none of the power, you can accomplish the exact same end and come out on top. So my advice is absolutely write your idea, but do it as a podcast first and then produce it. You'll have gone through the entire development process. You have to go through a development process anyway. You might as well have a finished product at the end of it that you can sell, that you can monetize, and then still sell as that same TV, movie, or feature film, TV series. Yeah, you can still do all that. It hasn't undermined your ability to do that. In fact, it's enhanced it.
Amazing. All right, Al. Okay, we're out of time. Okay, and I'd like to thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you for having me, Michael. Thank you. The pleasure was mine.
Absolutely. And I'd like to thank you, viewers, for tuning in. And I'll see you next time at Horror Talks Live.